After 30 years of teaching, I finally bought the peaceful farm I'd always dreamed of, until the HOA showed up, demanding I rip out my tomatoes, then started picking them themselves. What happens next is a battle not just for land, but for legacy. If you've ever had to stand your ground against bullies, this is one story you don't want to miss. After 30 years of teaching, I finally stepped into retirement with one goal in mind: to live peacefully on a small farm where I could grow fresh vegetables and reconnect with the land. I'd saved for decades, pinched pennies, and eventually purchased a beautiful 5-acre property just outside Maple Creek Estates. The soil was rich, the land quiet, and the view of the sunrise over the fields reminded me why I'd worked so hard all those years. But peace, as I soon learned, was short-lived. One warm morning, as I knelt beside my tomato plants, enjoying the simple joy of watching something grow, a sharp voice cut through the still air. "You can't grow food here. This isn't some country bumpkin neighborhood." I looked up to see a woman in a crisp white outfit and oversized designer sunglasses standing at the edge of my property like she owned the place. Her arms were crossed, her mouth tight with disapproval. That was the first time I met Eleanor Whitfield, president of the Maple Creek Homeowners Association. "Actually, I can," I said, calmly brushing soil from my hands. "This land's been farmed for over 50 years. It's zoned agricultural. I checked thoroughly before I bought it." Eleanor's face flushed with anger. "Your little farm violates at least 6 of our community's guidelines. The bugs, the weeds, the smell, it's all dragging down our property values." "My land isn't part of your HOA," I replied firmly. "It's outside your jurisdiction. That's why I bought it." She pulled out her phone and began snapping photos like she was building a case against me. "We'll see about that," she said sharply, turning on her spotless heels and stomping away like a judge delivering a verdict. That night, unease settled over me like a fog. I dug through every folder and drawer, pulling out my deed, zoning documents, and survey maps. Sure enough, the paperwork confirmed what I already knew. This land was mine, free and clear of HOA control. I took photos of every page, printed extra copies, and stored them in a fireproof lockbox. Something about the look in Eleanor's eyes told me she wasn't going to back off easily. I'd heard stories of overreaching HOAs from friends over the years, but I never imagined I'd be the next target. All I wanted was to grow food, live quietly, and maybe sell a few tomatoes at the farmer's market on weekends. I wasn't bothering anyone. But clearly, in Eleanor's eyes, that was exactly the problem. And just like that, what began as a peaceful retirement turned into something I never expected. A fight for my land, my livelihood, and my right to live the way I'd earned after a lifetime of honest work. 3 days after our first encounter, I found an official-looking envelope taped to my front door. Inside was a notice from the Maple Creek HOA declaring my property in violation of community standards and demanding I remove all agricultural activities within 14 days or face $100 in daily fines. I stood there on my porch, clutching that paper, heart pounding, not from fear, but from disbelief. I wasn't even part of their HOA. I immediately called the county records office. A kind clerk named Janet confirmed what I already knew. "Mr. Davis, your land is zoned agricultural and falls outside Maple Creek's HOA boundaries. They don't have jurisdiction over you." I asked for documentation, and she promised to send it by both email and certified mail. I felt a wave of relief, but also a rising concern. If they were so wrong, why were they pushing so hard? I carefully drafted a polite but firm letter attaching my deed and zoning maps, and hand-delivered it to the HOA office. I even took a photo of myself dropping it off. I wanted to believe that was the end of it. But that hope faded quickly. The following week, while harvesting bell peppers, my neighbor Jeff leaned over my fence. "Heard your name come up at the HOA meeting," he said in a low voice. "Eleanor's gunning for you. Called your place the eyesore farm and said you're setting a bad example." "Did anyone mention the letter I sent them?" I asked. Jeff shook his head. "She acted like she never got it." A knot formed in my stomach. I'd seen how power could twist people, but I wasn't going to be bullied. That night, I installed 4 motion-sensitive security cameras around the farm. They weren't cheap, but peace of mind rarely is. 2 days later, those cameras caught Eleanor and her so-called landscaping committee trespassing, walking through my rows with clipboards, pointing and tugging at my carrot tops like they were judging a county fair. When I came home to find some vegetables damaged and wilted in the sun, I knew they had gone too far. The very next morning, a new notice appeared. This time it declared my property a public nuisance, jacking the fines up to $250 a day, retroactive. At the bottom, Eleanor had scribbled a smug message in red pen. "Perhaps now you'll take us seriously." I didn't get angry. I got prepared. I called my attorney friend Sarah, who wasted no time. "They've trespassed, damaged your crops, and are issuing fake fines. We'll send a cease and desist. In the meantime, post no trespassing signs. Make it crystal clear they're not welcome." So I did. Bright yellow, bold letters. The message was simple. This land is not theirs. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Eleanor had declared war over vegetables, and I was just getting started. The morning after I caught the HOA landscaping crew trespassing, I thought I'd seen it all. But that illusion shattered when my lawyer, Sarah, called with a voice edged in concern. "Mark," she said, "I dug into the HOA's filings like you asked. You're not going to believe who submitted the zoning change request." My stomach dropped. "Who?" "Thomas Jenkins." I recognized the name instantly. He was the HOA treasurer, and the same man I'd seen chomping into my heirloom tomatoes like they were fair game. But Sarah wasn't finished. "His brother-in-law is County Commissioner Williams." I sat in stunned silence. The puzzle pieces clicked together fast and hard. The fake notices, the escalating fines, the surprise zoning application. This wasn't just an overzealous HOA. This was a coordinated push to change my land's zoning from agricultural to residential. If successful, I'd be forced to comply with HOA rules, and they could shut down my farm entirely. But that wasn't all. That same afternoon, a young reporter named Jenny Kim from the local paper stopped by my farm. Sharp-eyed and curious, she'd heard whispers of the conflict and wanted to see things firsthand. I showed her the broken irrigation lines, the trampled plants, the piles of paperwork. She asked to see the security footage, and I played the video of Eleanor and her crew helping themselves to my produce. Her eyebrows shot up. "They just stole it?" I nodded. "In broad daylight, with baskets." Jenny took notes furiously. "And they're trying to rezone your property?" "They already submitted the request." She looked up. "That's not just aggressive, that's suspicious." Suspicious turned to criminal when Eleanor's former assistant, Diane, showed up at my farm with something unexpected, a USB drive. Nervous, eyes darting over her shoulder, she handed it to me. "Don't tell anyone I came," she whispered, "but people deserve to know." The files on that drive? Damning. Dozens of internal HOA emails between Eleanor, Thomas, and Commissioner Williams, discussing fast-tracking zoning changes and referring to my farm as a prime development opportunity. One message chilled me to the bone. "If he won't sell, we'll bleed him dry with fines until he caves." I forwarded the files to Sarah, who responded within minutes. "This isn't just overreach, it's fraud and conspiracy." The worst part wasn't just the corruption, it was the betrayal of public trust. These weren't just pushy neighbors, these were people abusing power for personal gain. My land was their leverage. My farm, their target. My livelihood, just collateral damage. But now? I had evidence, and more importantly, I had resolve. If they wanted to turn this into a battle over greed and corruption, they were about to learn what happens when a farmer decides to fight back, with truth, with law, and with everything he's got. This wasn't about vegetables anymore. It was about justice. By the time Sarah and I left the county clerk's office, I was no longer just a farmer, I was a man with a mission. The documents we obtained that morning confirmed what I had long suspected. My 5-acre plot wasn't just outside the HOA's authority. It wasn't even within their official boundaries. Legally speaking, I was untouchable. But that hadn't stopped them from fining me, trespassing, and treating my land like their personal grocery store. So if Eleanor and her crew wanted to treat my farm like their all-you-can-eat buffet, I figured it was time they understood the value of what they were stealing. That afternoon, I built a sign. 6 feet tall, painted with bold red lettering, it read, "Maple Creek HOA members. Produce $50 per item. Trespassing fee, $500. Property under 24/7 surveillance." I planted it proudly right at the edge of my land, facing the entrance to Maple Creek Estates. Everyone coming in or out would see it. A line in the sand, painted in bold, no-nonsense terms. It wasn't about the money, it was about the message. I was done playing defense. The next move was mine. I kept the prices at my roadside stand affordable for everyone else. $3 for a pound of tomatoes, $1 for a pepper, $5 for a whole basket of strawberries. But for those who had stomped on my dignity, let them pay what it's worth, or better yet, stay away. Word spread fast. Neighbors from nearby towns started showing up in droves. Some came for the produce, others just to shake my hand. Even a few residents of Maple Creek, ones who weren't tied to the HOA's leadership, stopped by to offer their quiet support. "Eleanor's gone too far," whispered Mrs. Rodriguez, one of the corner lot homeowners. "We're not all like her. Some of us are just afraid to speak up." I thanked her with a fresh bag of cucumbers and a gentle smile. Their support mattered more than they realized. By mid-afternoon, I had my first official visitor. A black SUV screeched to a halt at the edge of my stand. Eleanor stepped out, flanked by Thomas and 2 more board members. Her face went purple the moment she saw my sign. "You'll take that harassment down immediately," she barked, storming over in her heels like a woman who hadn't been told no in decades. "It violates community bylaws about signage." I stood behind my produce table and kept my voice calm. "I'm not in your community. This is private, agricultural land, and that sign is perfectly legal." Thomas huffed. "You can't charge different prices. That's discrimination." "No," I said flatly. "It's called consequences." Several customers had pulled out their phones by then, recording the whole confrontation. Perfect. Let the world see what bullies look like when they're challenged. I reached under my table and pulled out a copy of the county zoning map, laminated and ready. "According to the official boundaries," I said, pointing, "your HOA ends right here. This farm, never part of it." For the first time, Eleanor's confidence cracked. "This isn't over," she hissed as they turned back toward their SUV. "No," I replied, meeting her glare with all the calm I could muster. "It's only just beginning." By sundown, Sarah had already filed a formal cease and desist letter, citing harassment, trespassing, and attempted theft. We attached photos, videos, and documentation. Every detail counted now. Because this wasn't just about vegetables or zoning lines anymore. This was about principle, and I wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. I woke up that morning to find my roadside sign shattered, splintered wood scattered like bones across the grass, the painted message scratched beyond recognition. 6 new violation notices were taped to my front door, this time citing illegal commercial activity and discriminatory business practices. The fines had ballooned overnight, $155,600. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream, but I did neither. Instead, I walked straight to my camera system and downloaded the footage. There, in crystal clear detail, was Eleanor Whitfield herself, along with Thomas Jenkins, creeping through my property at 3:17 a.m., armed with hammers and a crowbar. Under the security lights, their faces were unmistakable, brazen, almost gleeful, as they tore down what I had built. I sent the footage to Sarah, my lawyer. "They've just handed us a gift," she said, her voice cool and sharp like steel. "Criminal destruction of property, plain and simple, plus trespassing again." But Eleanor wasn't finished. The very next day, a landscaping crew returned, this time with orders not to trim, but to dig. They began cutting deep into the irrigation lines I'd repaired just weeks earlier. When I confronted them, one mumbled something about addressing a leak affecting the community. I called the police immediately. Officer Martinez returned, 3rd time in as many weeks. He reviewed the footage, shook his head in disbelief, and said quietly, "This has gone too far." But the real blow came later that night, in the form of a certified letter from the county's zoning board. A zoning reclassification request had been submitted. They were trying to rezone my farm, my home, from agricultural to residential HOA territory. If that passed, I'd be subject to their rules, their fines, and their control. I stared at the letter for a long time. It was like being told the walls of your house were slowly closing in. I forwarded the document to Sarah, who called me within minutes. "Guess who filed it?" she said bitterly. "Thomas Jenkins, and you'll never believe who his brother-in-law is, County Commissioner Williams." My stomach turned. Now it made sense. How they kept pushing past legal boundaries, why officers hesitated, why the zoning board even considered such a ridiculous request. They weren't just a nasty HOA anymore. They were working the system from the inside. "They're betting you'll give up," Sarah said. "Most people would." But I wasn't most people. I spent that weekend reinforcing every fence, mounting extra motion lights, and printing copies of every zoning map and legal document I had. I sent emails to the local newspaper, state representatives, and even a nearby TV station. I didn't care who thought it was dramatic. I had nothing to hide. Then came the final straw. I returned home from the market to find my irrigation pipes slashed in 3 different places. Crops that had survived the summer heat were already wilting. Thousands of dollars worth of vegetables, gone. Security footage showed Thomas, yet again, creeping across my field at 2:08 a.m., wire cutters in hand. I called Eleanor in a fury. "Your treasurer destroyed my irrigation system. I have him on video." Her voice was cold and condescending. "He was investigating a leak. You're overreacting. Maybe if you complied, this wouldn't keep happening." It wasn't just arrogance anymore. It was entitlement. Delusion. I hung up and emailed the footage to both the police and the news station. They wanted war? They had one. And this time, I wasn't just defending a farm. I was fighting to expose the kind of corruption that rots a community from the inside out, and I wasn't about to let them win. The courtroom was cold, but my palms were slick with sweat. I sat quietly, clutching a folder filled with every scrap of evidence we'd gathered: security footage, trespass logs, zoning maps, sworn statements. Across the aisle, Eleanor Whitfield and her cronies sat dressed like they were attending a business brunch, smug smiles and all. Thomas Jenkins even winked at me. My lawyer, Sophia Rodriguez, leaned over. "Let them feel confident," she whispered. "Pride comes before the fall." Judge Harriet Thompson entered, gavel in hand, and the room hushed to silence. "I've reviewed the filings," she began, her voice measured. "This is quite the neighborhood dispute." Her tone said more than her words. She turned to Eleanor's lawyer, a man who looked like he'd been pulled from a real estate seminar. "Explain to me why your clients believe they have authority over land clearly zoned agricultural outside HOA boundaries." The man launched into a monologue about community values and uniform aesthetics. He avoided the word law like it burned his tongue. "That wasn't my question," Judge Thompson interrupted, sharp as a nail. "You've just described your preferences. I'm asking about legal jurisdiction." From the gallery I heard a few chuckles. Sophia smiled. When it was our turn, Sophia stood with confidence that made me sit taller. "Your Honor," she said, "the evidence is clear and overwhelming." She projected video footage on the courtroom screen. Eleanor and Thomas stealing produce, cutting irrigation lines, destroying signs. Caught red-handed in the glow of motion-activated floodlights. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. "These are not acts of governance," Sophia said. "They're criminal acts, harassment, trespassing, theft, and vandalism. And they were done to force my client off his land. Land that has belonged to his family for over 50 years. Judge Thompson removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "Mrs. Whitfield," she said, "is that you on screen, hammering down a sign at 3 a.m? Eleanor hesitated. "Yes, but the context is you're destroying private property." She turned to Thomas. "And you, Mr. Jenkins?" Cutting irrigation lines at night? He swallowed. I was investigating a leak. At 2 a.m. with wire cutters? When recess was called, I stepped into the hallway for air. I overheard 2 HOA members arguing with Eleanor. "You told us this was legal," one hissed. "You never said anything about sneaking around in the dark." Back inside, things went from bad to worse for them. Our surprise witness, Angela Winters, the former HOA secretary, stepped forward nervously. "Mrs. Whitfield orchestrated all of this," she testified. "After a development proposal was denied, she said, 'If we can't buy him out, we'll force him out.' She promised positions on the board to anyone who helped." Eleanor went pale. Thomas put his head in his hands. Sophia turned to the judge. "This wasn't about vegetables or community standards. It was about greed." The room fell silent. Judge Thompson tapped her gavel softly. "I've seen many HOA cases. This one crosses the line from civil to criminal." She paused. "This court will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for my ruling." As we walked out, reporters swarmed the hallway, microphones shoved toward my face. "Do you think you'll win?" I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply said what I believed in my bones. When you tell the truth and back it with action, you don't have to hope justice finds you. You carry it with you. That night, I stood under the stars and looked across my field. Broken, battered, but still mine. Tomorrow we'd find out if the law still stood with the people. And I was ready. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed with quiet anticipation. Neighbors, reporters, and even a few quiet Maple Creek board members filled every bench. I took my seat beside Sophia, clutching the edge of the table as Judge Thompson re-entered, her expression unreadable. She didn't waste time. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, this court rules in favor of the plaintiff. The room erupted into whispers. Eleanor sank into her chair, pale as the paper in front of her. Thomas just stared at the floor. Judge Thompson continued, her voice firm and final. "The Maple Creek HOA has no jurisdiction over the plaintiff's land. Their actions constitute trespassing, theft, and property destruction. The HOA is hereby ordered to pay $443,500 in damages." I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Relief hit me like a wave I hadn't dared to believe would come. The judge wasn't done. "Furthermore, this case is referred to the district attorney for potential criminal charges." Her eyes met Eleanor's. "This court expects better from those entrusted with community leadership." As the gavel fell, the crowd stood, murmuring and clapping quietly. My knees were unsteady, but I stood tall. After months of threats, fines, and fear, justice had arrived. But the true healing didn't happen in the courtroom. It happened afterward. Later that day, a few neighbors stopped by, people I'd only ever waved to from across the road. Mrs. Rodriguez brought a peach cobbler. The Thompsons offered to help replant my garden beds. Some came just to say, "We're sorry, we didn't know what Eleanor was doing in our name." And then something truly unexpected happened. The interim HOA president, Mr. Ramirez, knocked on my door with an apology letter and a proposal. A new program to partner with my farm for a community garden. Residents could volunteer, learn about organic farming, and take home fresh produce, this time with permission. I didn't answer right away. I needed time to heal. But later that evening, as I watched the sun dip below the hills, I realized something important. This land was never just mine. It was a place meant to feed people, not just with food, but with purpose and connection. 2 weeks later, we posted a new sign at the edge of my farm. Community Garden, Saturdays at 9 a.m., all welcome. By midsummer, I had kids learning how to plant tomatoes, retirees swapping recipes under the old oak tree, and neighbors laughing together over lemonade and watermelon. My farm, once seen as a nuisance, had become the heart of a changed neighborhood. The ones who once tried to tear me down were gone. But those who stayed? They were rebuilding something better. And as I watched rows of sunflowers bloom where chaos once ruled, I smiled quietly. Because sometimes, when you fight for what's right, you don't just save your land, you help your community grow roots of its own. As I sat on the porch one quiet evening, a breeze rustled the newly grown leaves of the orchard trees I had almost lost to a battle I never asked for. The golden light of dusk bathed the fields, and for the first time in many months there was silence, peace, and most importantly, clarity. What had started as a simple dream to live a peaceful retirement growing vegetables had turned into something much bigger. It had become a test of resolve, a fight not just for land, but for truth, dignity, and the right to live by honest values in the face of unchecked power. There's a lesson in that. Actually, there are many. First, never underestimate the importance of standing your ground. No matter your age, your title, or your bank account, you have a voice, and when that voice speaks the truth, it carries farther than you think. I wasn't the loudest man in town, I wasn't the richest, but I was right, and I didn't back down. That mattered. Second, community isn't built by rules, it's built by people. The same folks who once turned a blind eye became the ones who rebuilt my garden, replanted my rows, and offered their help with sincere hearts. Sometimes, people just need someone to take the first stand to remind them what real neighborliness looks like. Third, power unchecked is a dangerous thing, but it is never permanent. The HOA's arrogance, fueled by fake authority and insider connections, eventually crumbled under the weight of truth and evidence. No matter how strong a system appears, if it's built on dishonesty, it will collapse. Sooner or later, justice finds a way. But maybe the most important lesson of all is this: you're never too old to make a difference. I thought my farming years would be quiet, just soil, sun, and seeds. Instead, I found myself at the center of a legal storm. And yet, through that, I discovered strength I didn't know I still had, and a purpose that reached far beyond myself. To those watching or listening, especially if you're in your later years, I'll say this: don't let anyone tell you your time has passed. Your wisdom, your life experience, and your quiet conviction are more powerful than you realize. Whether you're tending a garden, raising your voice at a community meeting, or simply doing what's right when no one is watching, it all matters. Because sometimes, it's the quiet ones who plant the seeds that change everything. And those seeds, given care and time, grow into something that outlives us all.